All right, should be good. Y'all might be able to hear it for a second, but I want to. We'll see. Does that sound good? We'll check that later. All right. Post about it. Do that, and let me post on Discord. We'll let some people trickle in as well before doing much else. Very impromptu. We'll see how many people end up showing up. Close that out. Give some more time for people to show up. Because I really want to discuss this ban list. This is about the best time I can do it. Take my lunch break. Is there any good images I can get up? Yeah. I know what I can do. Let me get up some reference images as well from the stream. Go collect. Why that's popping out. Explore sets. Let me know if I'm sounding all right, chat, before we get started with the discussion. What's the easiest way to do this? I'll just do it through here. That looks good. All right, very impromptu here, but I really want to discuss this ban list. So if anyone in chat can let me know if the audio sounds good. Looks all good on my end, but let me know if that is not the case. Ooh, that's not fun. What is... Ah, that's the part that's loose. There we go. All right. I don't have much time, so I'm not going to stall for much longer. Hopefully people can trickle in and join in the discussion as we go. So, ban list. Elestrals just dropped their second ever ban list, which is huge. Let's get that out of the way first. Not too long after the first one as well. Well, it's been a month, 5 weeks since the last ban list. It's a very short turnaround on this one, but it's all a part of my discussion as well, my thoughts on that. Make sure everything's still okay. Yeah, everything's still okay there. All right. Yep. If people hop in and get caught up, but I'm just going to get started right away. We'll go from there. You don't get caught up, hop into the conversation. But first off, before we get started in the stream, it's a good way to put it. I I have been very upfront that in the past I have worked with Elestrals. I was on their staff, helping out with set design, tournaments, testing team, so on and so forth. I was also part of their testing team for even longer than that. But with this ban list, and specifically why I'm live discussing about this, and I didn't go live with the Spark Hit ban list, is because by the time that all these decisions were made, it was being discussed, I left the group. No longer staff, no longer a tester. Therefore, I had no say in anything on this ban list. I was not aware of this ban list, which means that I'm just trying to process it and my thoughts like you all. Now, on the same note, obviously take what I say with a grain of salt, because I have been on the testing group, did work for staff. That doesn't mean I have some inherent biases, but of course we were never a hive mind. So I do have my own opinions and my own thoughts on the matter. And these are, my personal opinions are not reflective of Elestrals as a whole. The whole purpose of this video is to be an interesting discussion about the ban list and the dynamics at play and what my ultimate thoughts are, personally completely detached from Elestrals. Dan is aware of my opinions on it, as he usually is, and thus I have the utmost respect for him and what he did. So really to get started, like right out of the gate, I just want to say I love the ban list video. I think he did a great job on it. I loved the 3 things that he said in that video. I forget how he framed it, but the 3 things he said, I think were all great. His philosophies behind the ban list, how he plans to approach it moving forward. I love the transparency. I love his take on it. So I think that is a huge win for Elestrals. I want to make that very clear, first of all. Also, this is going to be a bit of a rambly stream because I'm not working off the script. Pretty much, I was just thinking of, what could a video look like that discusses this? Hey, words. Hey, I had no involvement with this. I don't know what you said. How did you do this to me? I had no say in this. So, your fault. Just say it right now. Your fault. Should have been playing fruit. Nah. In all seriousness, though. Yeah, I really like the ban list video. Thought Dan approached this very well. I'm very thankful for the communication. I think that is a huge win for Elestrals overall. Now, let's get into this actual ban list. So first off, I want to say my first thoughts about this ban list was that too soon. Mainly too soon from the start of the daybreak meta. Typically, I don't think it's a good idea to interject in a developing meta. Because it creates, if you get the habit of doing it, you do it too frequently, it kind of gets to the point of, well, what's the point of experimenting, digging deeper into the meta when you know if there is a problem, likely there's a list to address it, and you don't necessarily need to innovate on your own deck builds and strategies. Or it might feel, why am I spending time doing this if there's just going to be a ban list? However, there are exceptions to this rule, and I do think today's ban list does fall into one of the exceptions that I think is an acceptable one. But that was my first reaction before I really thought about this list, just out of the gate. To be able to explain why I think it's one of those exceptions, I think it's best if I actually go over my thoughts on the individual restrictions first. So let me switch to, where's my monitor view? Hope it's set up correctly. I did not check monitor with webcam. Yeah, there we go. Let's start with Drataya. Drataya banned. It's gone. You cannot legally play this in tournaments. This does not surprise me. This card is bonkers. It's a card that I have felt has been problematic for a while now. Sorry, getting distracted by ring notifications. I heard the ring camera go off. What is it? Oh, it's just a mail carrier. Okay, that's fine. It's been a card that I think have been bonkers for a while. Just unrestricted draw 2 every time you cast a card. You got 6 copies in your deck. You can go through a lot of it. You can high roll. You're all too familiar with the high rolls, but also the just absolute bricking of this card. But I even remember back during Prototype, because this card was unchanged from Prototype, I remember Prototype Tournament, Finals, Game 2. I just went Ambrosia, draw 2. Ambrosia, draw 2. Oh, look, third Ambrosia, draw 2. Oh, look, I've stabilized. It's my check on words. Yep. I mean, look at his profile picture. Even my Discord profile picture has a Jataya from that instance. So I was seeing just how crazy that card can be back in the day as well. But yeah, it's been doing some stuff. But let's actually talk about the reason the deck that got it banned. The Waspire FTK/OTK. I know I've seen people mention, hey, Waspire, that's the problematic card. And I'm not here to discuss whether or not Waspire is problematic or not. Because the crux of the issue is, the reason you can get to the Waspire is because you can draw through your entire deck assisted by Drataya. And if you hit the Waspire, that core to draw through your deck's just sitting there waiting for something else to break it. Like, what is that other payoff? Is it Eruption? Can you find a way to loop it back with Pandison? So there's a way to do that in the future. What about Mill? I've heard all those discussed before. So to me, this ban makes a lot of sense because it's really, I don't know if, obviously there's still always a chance that there's a way to still draw through your deck, but it severely hampers it. On top of that, I guess I should back up a second to say that also the other reason Drataya doesn't surprise me is, as Dan mentioned in the video, the testing group had heard murmurs of it a few months ago. I was still there. So this card, while I was not involved with the actual decision to ban it, opinions, so on and so forth, nor the Escape from Tartarus version that Dan showed that is still being finished up, it doesn't come as a surprise to me anyway, because of those murmurings. But yeah, so just the draw the deck, get a payoff, not surprised that this got hit. That's not beneficial. It's not a good thing for the game to have this kind of looming threat that someone might break. And on top of that, the game plan that it is facilitating of draw your entire deck, regardless of the payoff to it, that's not a fun deck to sit across. It's not a good tournament experience, period. Good locals experience, period. And for that, I think that reason alone is enough to justify banning it. Yeah, I wasn't expecting them to just say like, no, you can't play Drataya. But yeah, good call out, Zacharias. You can still play it in today's tournament. I wouldn't be surprised if you can still play it. Well, I don't know about the app tournament. I shouldn't speak on that. But yeah, I'm not too surprised about that. That's not a good way to do a ban list. If you immediately have it take effect and just say to anyone who is planning on bringing this, too bad. Your core piece is gone. But yeah, I think the gameplay experience period is enough to get it banned. FTKs, you know, a lot of times those aren't viewed as very fun to play and usually get hit as well. I know Yu-Gi-Oh! Just recently had one. So I do think that is a valid reason as well, but I think just spend 20 minutes, I don't know if that's actually accurate, but just spend all this time on your first turn drawing through your entire deck, making your opponent sit there. And yeah, that's not a good gameplay experience. I mean, that's up to you, Zacharias. I probably won't be playing in today's casual tournament, so if you want to do that, go for it. Would I recommend it? Probably not. I think your opponents would be very happy, but at the same time, it's one last hurrah, so I can't fault you for it either. The second thing about the Drataya ban, which makes me happy, is less so to do with the actual reason it got banned, but my opinion on this card in general. This is just my opinion, completely separate from the testing group. Probably going to say that multiple times throughout this video. I have always thought a card like this that can just high roll draw through your deck, which is absolutely crazy, really limits design space for future fruit support. For instance, wouldn't it be crazy? Hey, Luck. Decided to take my lunch break to discuss this because I had thoughts and I determined a live stream with interaction was best to discuss. Better for me to discuss than just making a video because I ramble too much without the back and forth. So I was saying, I find a powerful card like this to be really restrictive to the fruit deck in general. You can't introduce an Ambrosia Searcher without potentially breaking this card elsewhere. There are ways, of course, I think you can support it, but I do think they're severely limited because of the potential of this card just to break things wide open. Even if it isn't necessarily for fruit, just for other decks like it has done. So for me, it sucks for fruit players. It sucks for words. In the short term. Absolutely does, because your deck isn't playable anymore. I think you might be able to spin something with Lodigan, but fruit as a deck, you're really just kind of playing Lodigan at that point. But I think in the long run, this is going to be fantastic for Fruit. I think this opens up the door for, let me full screen this so you don't have to look at my bookmarks. It opens up the door for a lot more opportunities for Fruit as a deck. And I think that's overall a good thing. So good ban. I like this one. I think it was never a matter of if, but when. I'm not going to dwell on it. I don't think there's anything incriminating on my bookmark bar. No, there's like nothing. But anywho, let's go into the next part of the discussion, the limits. And while I dig up the first card, as I try to remember what were the cards, that's what they were. While I dig these up, also, while I'm thinking about it, if you haven't done already, please consider subscribing and turn on the notification bell so you're notified when I upload more content. Because I really love making Elestrals content. I usually go live every so often with openings and have the occasional video as well. Here we go. Restrictions. So next up, the restrictions. We got Earthquake. Speaking of which, let me do it this way. We've got Earthquake. We've got Stardex. That's what I need. Where's Laurels? We got Rusty on your Laurels. I could have done the Shadow Stars one. And then we've got Lavalith from Frostfall. Perfect. Nope, that's not what I wanted. Just opened up 3 here. Oh my gosh. Let's see. Open. Link in new tab. There we go. I don't see Fruit deck playable. Try Tartar playing different from Fruit is probably just morph into a weird amalgamation of Earth Beatdown on login. Yeah, I could see that because Ambrosia is still a good card in Earth. Like the actual Ambrosia interactions are still good. Okay, but the cards restricted to 1. We've got Lavalith, we've got Laurels, we've got Earthquake. Before getting to these cards, I think the best place to start is the decks that were mentioned for utilizing these cards before and why they got restricted. 5s, Earth Nexus / Earth Beatdown, and then the little guy deck. And they all have one thing in common, and that is that they are very spirit efficient. They just take it from different angles, approach that from different angles. And the reason this matters, I think, is just a truth about Elestrals on a mechanical level. Because your life and resource system are intricately tied together, decks that are spirit efficient will always have an advantage over decks, and just inherent advantage, I think a significant one, over decks that are not. Because you need resources to kind of keep up or come back in a game, is really hard if you're on low spirits to be able to do that and then progress your game plan. It's near impossible a lot of the games to do that. And I typically find that usually within the first few turns of the game, you know who's set up to win by who has the spirit advantage, board advantage, so on and so forth. And from there, you just kind of play out the rest of the game. Not to say there isn't comeback chances, but it's not pervasive. Yeah, I know they massacred your 5s. I'm sorry, Luck, but it had to be done. But yes, it is just really hard for decks that, like, pretty much if a deck is going to dump a bunch of spirits, they need a way to make up on those spirits and pressure the opponent to make up on those spirits to justify running them. And then I feel like the whole, specifically with 5s and Earth, the whole life as a resource system kind of comes to a head there, because attacking is the most efficient way to remove cards, whether that be back row or Elestrals. So you're combining these highly spirit efficient cards with a high stat total, where typically they either pressure the opponent to get them to use more resources, or have a high defense, which requires your opponent to typically commit more spirits to outing them than you did into it, and usually get a benefit anyway. So those two just inherently powerful aspects of a card just mesh together. And thus we get 5s. We get Earth Nexus. Oh yeah, 100%. That is a good call out, Zekris. There is always winners and losers in banless situations. and I was going to say this at the end, I'll say this now. Is this ban list a perfect solution? Absolutely not. But what it does is it keeps things fresh and interesting, it gives players room to innovate, and that is inherently exciting, just shifting things up. And maybe it will lead to something else problematic coming up. But at least it's something different that we have to build to. It will take time. And I think that is the most important part about this. The little guy's deck takes the spear's efficiency the other way. Instead of having these inherently powerful big bodies on board, instead they take it from another angle where they just use these little bodies that recover a ton of spirits and can use the fact that they're always up on spirits on their removal, which is either more efficient than what the opponent's playing out, just as efficient, or might be a little less spirit efficient, but they can justify it because of all the recovery. So a bit different there, but the end result is still very similar. They just outpace the opponent in the long run. The other part about the 5s and the Earth Nexus / Beatdown deck, in terms of spirit efficiency, that why I understand the removal being targeted, is because they're so spirit efficient, they can justify running those removal cards, whether it be at a spirit deficit or break even, because at a spirit deficit, if you're already more spirit efficient than the opponent, then you've got extra spirits to work with. So you put your opponent in this awkward position where they're pressured to deal with your Elestrals, your main game plan. But as they're dealing with it, they're being attacked from another angle from your Invoke removal, which they really don't have much counterplay to, really, if any, at least no optimal counterplay. It just all causes these factors to proliferate, I think is the right word I'm looking for, and build upon each other to just a titan of a deck that it's not difficult to see why people are viewing these decks as the potential best decks. With the FTK being kind of adjacent to it because, you know, you can't outlast if you're dead. That one's kind of off to the side there. But also a format like this does mean it lends more credence to the FTK getting played. All of this stuff a lot of the stuff that I'm talking about has been covered in Swolax stream on the Elestrals channel. If you haven't done so already, I'd highly recommend checking them out. They're really well done. I really do enjoy them. But to be fair, if you're watching this channel, you've probably already been watching the Elestrals, or at least are aware of them. But very good streams. He just did another one last night talking about the big bodies. Because I believe that's what it was. I had to join in for like 5 minutes and then had to go. But these are the issues at play here. So let's actually get into these restrictions itself. So all these cards are one, starting with Lavalith. Dan mentioned this as a comeback card. And that is true. But I think the more important aspect, which Dan also did highlight about this card, is the fact that it punishes decks specifically that want to get spirits on board, which is a lot of decks right now. You've got your Divides, you've got your Stadiums, Artifacts, which are probably the weakest of the bunch. But any deck that wants to put extra spirits on board now has to contest with this Lavalith, and they have to deal with it. So this kind of gatekeeps them. I think that's the crux of it. This card gatekeeps them. Laurels. Pretty much the same situation here. This card gatekeeps decks that want to build up bodies on board by giving an efficient removal. In a vacuum, both this and Lavalith, and Earthquake for that matter, I think make a lot of sense. In the set they were developed, it makes sense to have these sorts of cards. But the issues were still, I think, present. Like, Ascensions were not viable in set 1, typically, with the concern of, oh, I can just Laurels them. For 1 spirit, I get rid of your 3. Thanks, Zekris. Have a good one. I need to hopefully wrap this up soon since I need to be back at 1. Kind of clocked in. Okay, so Laurels. Just super... It just punishes those. I think that's the real issue at play here is it gatekeeps decks, again, that want to put out spirits on board by being just a really efficient removal option. And any deck can run it as well. The little guys deck can also use that to great effect because they typically don't want to commit stuff onto board. I don't know how well it is in 5s. I think it's still a decent card. But you get the idea. The big thing is it's gatekeeping stuff. Earthquake. This one isn't necessarily spirit efficient, except it's good against 2 costs and 3 costs. But to me, it does present this awkward scenario where target destroyer Elestral is really strong. It can answer anything. And while it does cost Earth, so it's a bit more specific, it does still punish you for pushing through stuff. But I think more importantly, and the reason we're seeing Earth Nexus pop up a lot, is because what this card kind of creates a situation of is, since this is the best removal option from Invoke, like, I think Invoke makes it a bit more powerful than a counter at this point in the stage of the game. It makes this awkward situation where decks that can afford to run Earthquake are typically going to be better than decks that can't. Because this card's so good, so crucial. And it does punish decks that want to try to extend further as well. That's true. So I think all these make sense. Now, to 1, my initial concern about 1 is swinginess of it. Situations like, oh, my opponent drew the exact card they needed to out my stuff. Cool. Make sure I'm not missing a message here. Or in situations you're like, oh, I just need to find that Earthquake. I just need to find that Lavalith. You just don't find them because they're at 1 copy. That feels bad. And this will happen. Like, this 100% will happen. But I think the important thing with these cards are, 1, are they so swingy that 1 copy of them is problematic? And my answer is typically no. I think it's more deck dependent. And it's got a larger tolerance. And I end up really liking the hit to 1 because these are still important cards to have to keep stuff in check as an answer. But the important thing here is now you don't have to deal with follow-up these, especially with Lavalith. Like, you answer the Lavalith. Like, you have to answer this. And then you go to reestablish stuff, and they just drop another Lavalith on you. What are you doing then? That's very oppressive. Laurels, same deal. Efficient removal. All right, cool, you got it. You got efficient removal. Let me try to reestablish. Second Laurels. And then same thing with Earthquake. I think a bit to a lesser extent, but still same thing. And more importantly, with Restoring Laurels and Earthquake, it cuts down on the max number of copies a deck can run max number of copies of removal a deck can run. Meaning now, if you have those removal options, you need to be a lot more careful on what you use them on because you don't have as much follow-up. And ultimately, just kind of summarizing all this, I think these restrictions are good because they target, because I don't think these cards are inherently problematic, but being able to play multiple copies of them just punishes decks too much. So now, I don't think it's, as I said, I don't think it's necessarily a perfect solution. There'll be times where you need the Earthquake but can't find it. So you need the Laurels but can't find it. But it does give more room for decks to compete because they know the opponent won't necessarily have it. It's a bit of a catch. And I think that latter point outweighs the former point. On top of that, Elestrals has other ways to remove. Boombat, Veritaqua. Dan showed off a bunch of those. And because there are other options, I think decks can get way more creative now. I think those removal options are way more interesting and really expand what a deck, what the potential decks can do. And ultimately, my conclusion on this list is, I think it just gives more decks a chance to compete, especially ones that like to use their Divine, their Stadium, so on and so forth. Because as it stands right now, those are what we're getting gate capped. Tying it back around to my point of the haste in which this ban list was put out, and why I actually don't think that's as big of a problem as, like, it's one of the exceptions to my statement of is not ban lists in haste, so early in format, are not typically a good idea. I think this makes sense in this context. One, because these issues that I've just outlined, mainly with the removal and the decks that are being able to utilize them to the highest degree, is nothing new. We've been seeing this since base set in different forms. You can make the argument that these would have risen up if Thunder Nexus wasn't there, which I think is fair. But these aren't new issues. It just so happened we finally got to the point where they're front and center. The second thing is the seeming gatekeeping nature of this restricting what can be brought. Is there a chance that there's a deck out there that can compete with these, that can, you know, just a deck that breaks the mold of what these decks that so far do, that isn't FTK, and compete? Absolutely. But that could be one deck. Maybe not even two. Still doesn't mean that multiple decks aren't getting gate capped. And on top of that, if you're competing, are you spending that time to find these decks, or are you just playing what you know is good because of reasons? There's a lot of intricacies there at play that I don't think are necessarily fun for a competitive format. As much as I could say there's more room to develop, will it just be fine-tuning these efficient lists? Which, if they're interesting, something you might find interesting, that's fine. But on a macro scale for Elestrals, is it good to have the best decks gatekeep some of the most interesting mechanics of the game? Nexus, the Divines. So much so that they're not seeing any competitive play. And if you face someone with a meta deck, likely you're going to struggle because you're just playing something that gets heavily punished from them. I don't think so. That one's my opinion. I just don't think so. Finally, time to use rock in a hard place. Hey, playing water. I don't see why not. That's a good call out. Player removal options, even still in the invoke category, that just are a bit more fair, potentially. But yeah, back to my point of, I just think on a macro level for Elestrals, this ban list does a net good. Is it going to be perfect? Probably not. This is highly unexplored territory. We've got less removal now, meaning maybe Ascensions are more viable. Maybe more swinging decks can pop up. Maybe something problematic again will pop up. Who knows? But at the end of the day, this gives those other decks a chance to compete. This gives reason for players to test them, to theory craft, to really explore. And it gives players less decks to dread because through game mechanics alone, they are inherently better than what you're trying to do. I think that's a net good. Luck, are you able to say here, or do you just want to message me? Because now you can't say that and I'm not curious. But I think that's about it for my thoughts on the ban list. I do think this is, while at first I was hesitant, I do think this is overall good. This is going to be very interesting moving forward into the next tournaments to see what people cook up, what people bring. And that's just really exciting in general. So I also want to reiterate, because I know I said this before a lot of you hopped in, I love the ban list video. I thought Dan did a great job on it. I love the 3 points he made, the discussion. And yeah, no, not everyone's going to be happy with this ban list. And I might be in the minority. Full Tempest. Yeah, that's interesting. Well, how can I stop that? Maybe I just need to whip out Earth Nexus and just use Mudlet Switch or Voltemps to defense and then just beef it up with a bunch of Demeters. But no, the fact that we're even having this conversation is so exciting, because you are right, Voltempest gets a lot more interesting. Do I need to like Tsunami Veritaqua your Voltempest as well? Like, but yeah, I think it still just proves your point. The point of this makes things more interesting. I forget what I was saying. Oh yeah, I love the ban list, but I love his points. Not everyone's going to be happy with this, and that's completely fair. I just, from my perspective, I think this is just a net good overall. I really hope we don't have to see a ban list in another month, because I really don't want to make this a monthly occurrence, but it's a tough line to balance overall. But at the same time, if if I think Dan's overstepping, I'll let him know. And that can be a appropriate discussion. It really is a balancing act at the end of the day. And I also have faith that Dan's listening to the testing team, the community, to judge whether or not it's appropriate or not. That'll be fun. Oh, speaking of which, probably have your luck. I will not be able to make it this weekend. I've just got too much going on, and I can't justify heading down there for a day. Hope you have fun, though. You have to let me know how you do. While I'm thinking about it as well, Not what I meant to do. Ah. Gosh darn it. Meant to be on here, but that was fun. Where is it? I didn't say anything back then. I feel fine saying this now. I think it's quite interesting. Where are you? Astrabbit. I remember seeing discussion. Should Astrabbit be the one that gets banned, not Sparkit? And interestingly enough, my reason that back then I did not agree with that is in part due to Astrabbit being a more resource filter tool. It doesn't have direct impact on the board, but it supports so many other decks, just gives them an extra piece of consistency. I think this would have had way more sweeping impacts than Sparkit did. Spark just affects Thunder Nexus. And I don't like those implications of Astro. I think it hurts more decks than it benefits. That being said, though, what doesn't help some of that opinion now is just seeing that where the meta developed to, but I don't think that is inherently an Astrabbit problem. I think that's more speaking to the powerful invoke removal and really understanding the dynamics of the game mechanics. So that's my take on it. I really don't think Astrabbit needs to get banned, at least not yet. I don't know if it ever will be. We'll see. I don't know if I agree with that luck. For the reason of you end up in the scenario of if you draw your Astrabbit turn 1, woo, awesome, this is amazing. And if not, you're just kind of sad about it. I don't think that necessarily creates the best game dynamic, despite it being a staple. If it's a staple in every deck, I think I'd rather see it hit before limited to 1, or just leave it unhit. Because this is a card that I could see naturally being filtered out with new sets when elements get better support, better consistency cards to help out. This is just kind of a band-aid to a solution that future cards can fix. Yeah, you're 100% right on that one. That is a justification I see for banning it, but I think it would do more harm. I would be willing to entertain an Astrabbit ban most likely in a few sets from now if decks get more consistency cards and then they're still running Astrabbit on top of it. Because then at that point, Astrabbit's just an insane card that just makes sense for all decks versus being a band-aid for a lot of the decks to help with some consistency issues. But I don't know. I'm not interested in that right now. But I totally understand where you're coming from. Okay, that I agree with. It was wild times back then, though, because I know I agree why it was initially buffed to 5 defense, because at 4 defense, it just got too easily run over. And it's not an inherently powerful card since it doesn't progress the board state. However, with the other changes that were made, such as dropping Kinleo's attack, dropping Exaltair's attack, yeah, this should have gone back down to 4. It's one of those situations where either this should have gone back down to 4, or those two should have been kept at 4. Something like that. But anyhow, this has been fun. I think I'm going to go quickly scarf down some food so I can be back ready to go at 1 at work. I don't know if I'll ever do one of these again because I will be back on staff after my wedding, so it'll be a bit hard to discuss these things when I have insider information and it isn't as clearly my opinion. But like this one I felt fine on because this is just clearly my own personal player opinion on the matter. Maybe I'm a bit more sympathetic to Dan and the staff understanding just because I've been a part of that before, but in terms of this actual ban list, 100% my thoughts. Not influenced by any of them. At least not directly. But yeah, let me switch back to my webcam. Thank you all for those who hopped in for the impromptu stream. This was fun. I was thinking about doing a video, but I'm like, I like the discussion. It makes me feel a bit better having some feedback to kind of curate my thoughts instead of me just aimlessly rambling. hoping my point comes across. I'm really bad at that, but yeah. For those of you in chat that are watching this afterwards that haven't done so already, please consider subscribing to my channel and turn on the notification bell so you're notified when I do upload more content, because I usually stream whenever there's product openings. I've got a stream coming up at some point with Silver Beanie, opening some product, playing some games. I don't know when that is yet. My schedule, unfortunately, is very, very busy right now leading up to my wedding, but it'll eventually happen. So if you're interested in that, please consider doing so. But with that, I'm going to get out of here. Hope you all have a great rest of your day, and I look forward to also seeing any additional comments in the comment section below. Later, guys.